I'm Brian Donnelly, you may know or not, Chairman of Standards, and thank you very much everybody for attending today. The usual admin and log. We are being live streamed, no video, just audio. The exits are there and there if we should have to leave in a big hurry, which I hope we won't. I remind everybody and the public that this is a meeting in public and not a public meeting. Right. Let me straight away introduce Liz Fenik, who's a new officer who's joined us in Democratic Services. So it's very confusing with two Liz's. And I'm at enough risk. I'm at enough risk from my own.
Number two.
Anyway, we welcome Liz and thank her for choosing to join Horsham District Council. I'm sure she'll be happy here. Certainly with the other Liz to look after. Liz is a great worker.
I am the Council's Monitoring Officer, but also the Head of Legal and Democratic Services. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lauren Kelly, Property Lawyer in the Legal Department and Deputy Monitoring Officer, and I get involved in standards.
Robert Baxendale, Legal Services Business Manager and Deputy Monitoring Officer.
And I'm Peter West, graduate trainee.
I can remember when I was the graduate trainee, just.
Yes, and I'm Liz DePauli from Democratic Services.
Okay.
That's my colleague Liz.
Thank you very much. And I say again, thank you to everybody for attending. It's appreciated. Item on the agenda is, and we're all so delighted that Sharon's got over her illness. I presume everybody did know, and it was, yeah. May I say what it was?
Yeah.
COVID. I should be further away. Yeah, Sharon had COVID, and her family's been affected as well. So it's been a really, really tough 6, 7, 8 weeks for Sharon. But she looks her usual delightful self now. So let's hope it's all uphill. No, uphill. Yeah, downhill. Oh, yeah. You're a skier. Anyway, we are. So it's great to see Sharon back as well. And I mean, my daughter-in-law in Bristol, they caught it 4 weeks ago, not seriously, but we went down with the fire brigade. Morning, David.
Apologise for being late.
Yeah, it's been recorded. And for those who don't know, this is the Chairman of Council, Councillor David Skip, etc., etc. Okay, item 1, apologies. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, apologies have been received from Steve Watkins.
Steve Watkins, okay. So we can now note that Councillor Skip's here. Thank you, David. And anybody know where Alan Britton is? Is Alan well? Do you know at all, David?
I
I know he has had health in the past, health problems.
haven't seen him or heard anything from him.
Yeah.
A little while.
Yeah.
But I can see him in the distance.
Yeah. Okay, good. Right. Item 2, minutes of the last meeting. May I sign as a true and correct record? Right. Everybody agrees that I may sign them as a true and correct record. It looks like we're into December. And as always, all the ladies have got their Christmas presents and the boys have still got leaving it till the 23rd. Right, that's minutes. Item 3 are declarations. Do any members have declarations to make? No members have declarations. Thank you very much. Announcements. I haven't any more announcements. Do the officers have any announcements? No. Right, no announcements. We therefore go on to item 5, the Councillor Code of Conduct. I hope we can get through this one quite quickly. Oh, what's it, 60 pages or something. I do thank the officers for all the work they've done in drafting this. It's quite something, and I think it's quite awesome. Sharon.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to hand over to Robert Baxendale, who's kindly offered to talk us through these changes. And it's not as big as it looks, just to kind of reassure us that we should get through it pretty quickly. So I'll hand over to Rob. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. We refer to agenda item 5 at page 7. The executive summary is a report to Standards Committee following the full adoption of the Model Councillor Code of Conduct on the 29th of April. We made slight amendments to that version, but in effect it was the Model Councillor Code of Conduct produced by the LGA. The Standards Committee to consider these further minor amendments and to decide whether to recommend to full council the adoption of the code incorporating these further amendments. So in effect, the recommendation is for the Standards Committee to recommend to full council the adoption of the Council Code of Conduct as amended, also to make any consequential changes within the Constitution to wording. We've noticed that some of the wording in what is the current Council Code of Conduct is slightly different to what councillors are used to, it's particularly with regard to interests, etc. And further, what we propose doing is full training on both the new Model Code of Conduct, but also to the arrangements, the procedures to deal with Code of Conduct complaints, which we'll come to. Generally, when the LGA started working on their guidance to accompany the new Model Code of Conduct, they realised that there were a few amendments were necessary and needed for clarity. They also realised that there was a mistake within the Model Code of Conduct. So a correction has actually been made regarding unpaid directorships, which in the Model Code of Conduct was included in the criminal disclosable pecuniary interest section. However, the inclusion of this was just a temporary, was a recommendation from a previous Government Standards Committee report, and it wasn't actually law. So in effect, that's probably the main change, and that's come out and gone into the other registrable interest section. So perhaps if I could very briefly take you to the amendments. On page 14 of the bundle before you, you'll see within the definitions of local authority, we've actually included neighbourhood councils. We've spoken with the neighbourhood councils. They do want to adopt the Council Code of Conduct. It wasn't within the definition there, so that's just a tidying up to include neighbourhood councils. That's the first amendment. Moving on, we go to page 24. Paragraph 8, it details at C, you'll see that the track changes in red of financial interest or well-being of a body included under other registrable interests as set out in table 2. So in effect, this is correcting the mistake, and we'll come on to table 2. Also, paragraph 8, it goes on to say you must disclose the interest in order to determine whether you can remain in the meeting after disclosing your interest. The following test should be applied. So what it's doing is connecting 9 with 8. If 8 applies, then it goes on to 9, and it makes that clear. At paragraph 9, where the matter, and I don't think that this was in before, which means it didn't quite make sense, referred to in paragraph 8 above affects the financial interest or well-being, and then it goes on to say what that test is. So again, it's just clarifying the actual position. At paragraph 10, this wasn't in the original or our original Code of Conduct, but it deals with the cabinet position. So again, it mirrors the position above, but in effect, that's the amendment there. Moving on to table 1, bottom of page 24, you'll see any unpaid directorship has been crossed out because that's in the wrong position. That shouldn't be under disclosable pecuniary interest. Then moving on to page 26, table 2, it just adds, you must register as an other registrable interest. And then A, you'll see is any unpaid directorship. So that's where it's moved that to. So in effect, that is the changes. They are minor changes, but they are important ones. That if we adopt these changes, in effect, it brings us up to the latest version of the LGA Model Code of Conduct. Moving on from that, I just bring your attention to what is a very good guidance. It's long, but it is useful. It is good. It gives examples. It gives circumstances, and it will certainly help us dealing with standards, but it will also help members interpret the code of conduct. And that can be seen at pages 29, and it goes through to page 70. It might be that we consider producing copies of this guidance for each district councillor, along with the amended code of conduct.
Yes, I think that should be done.
In effect, that's the end of my report. If anyone's got any questions or anything.
Diana.
Just a couple of points to clarification. On page 24, the new paragraph 4, is that which relates to the cabinet? Was that put in by the LGA, or is it something we're putting in?
It was in. I think there's been 3 versions of their model code. As I understand it, it wasn't in the first one. It came in to the second one, and it's obviously in the one now. But yes, it is an LGA.
Thank you. Just a couple of minor suggested amendments that I've heard. I'm looking at that paragraph 10. I think just to read it, says where you have an other registrable interest or non-registrable interest on a matter to be considered or is being considered. I think there should be a which there, or which is being considered by. So it would read on a matter to be considered or which is being considered by which can also going back to just above that paragraph 8, the last sentence, which is being put in as an amendment, in order to determine whether you can remain in the meeting after disclosing your interest, the following test should be applied. Now, because of the word following, you would expect the test to be continued in that paragraph, whereas it is in fact in paragraph 9. So I think that should say, in order to determine whether you can remain in the meeting after disclosing your interest, B, and then delete following, continue test, and then insert the words in paragraph 9. To make sense of that. And then we've got this, in paragraph 9, it says where the matter, and then it refers back to paragraph 8, to paragraph 8 above. I think there should be a similar reference in paragraph 8 to paragraph 9. So those are 2 comments on suggested further amendments. And just the final comment I had was guidance is so very long and very comprehensive and very helpful. I just want to know what action this committee is recommend council to take in relation to the guidance.
Well, to read it.
Are we just noting it?
Yeah.
Or does it form part of?
Well, they'll have to approve it. It's all going forward for approval. So it's got to be approved. And we would hope that they would be reading it and using it as a Bible's the wrong word, you know what I mean, as a standard reference. It is a heck of a lot. And I know that puts a lot of people off, but I think we must hammer it just there. It's a great piece of on-job training in a sense. I mean, it's the sort of stuff that, you know, you probably spend several hours in a training session trying to convey, whereas you've got that there. And also, as has already been said, it's been fantastic guidance for the officers and for the committee and the subcommittees when they meet in determining any complaints. But we would stress that they should really try and work through it, as you know, in their career as councillors.
So, are we recommending that the council should adopt guidance?
Yes, yes. It is in para 5 to recommend to full council the adoption of the code of conduct as amended. Are you? Yes, Sarah. No, are you finished, Dinah?
Yes,
Okay.
finished. What do you think of my suggested amendments?
Well, I don't think we're disagreeing. It's fine. They've been noted and it will be changed. Yeah. Yes, Sharon.
Chairman, if I could just say, it is unusual that the guidance has appeared now, because if we go back a few months, it was quite a few months, that was when full council adopted the new code of conduct. So for the guidance to come afterwards is slightly unusual. But I think what Councillor Vanderpoot is trying to ascertain is, where do we want the guidance to sit? So do we want it part and parcel of the code of conduct, so it will sit behind, or is it a standalone guidance that we would give with our training, monitoring officers training and conduct training? You know, where is it going to be placed? Is it part of the code of conduct? Does it sit alongside? Does it go into our constitution? Or is it something that we would be asking for members to again, we could do our training, but also some assurances that members have actually looked at it. And I think, is that right, Diana? Yes.
Well, where does it stand at the moment?
Chairman, it stands at the moment that this is the guidance that should be read along for members, and this is how you would interpret it. It goes alongside to help you interpret the new code that we have already adopted. We're about to make a few tiny changes that have been recommended. But it certainly helps with going through. It's always been difficult with pecuniary interest, with what we need to disclose, councillors' capacity, are you in the scope? And there are some really good examples. So it helps. It deals with social media. We wondered when that was going to come, and there is some guidance with social media. So I think it's important. We've not had this before. We've never had true direction, and we've never had a true interpretation. So what we need to do is make sure members see it. Our training will certainly it will involve it, and we will use it for sure. And when we come to investigate and determine, we will be going to obviously the code, because the guidance that comes with the code, because that's what, you know, you've either breached or you haven't. So it's just really, what does this council want to do with the guidance, and how will we use it going forward?
But where is it actually parked at the moment? It's not in the constitution, certainly not to this length. And I imagine it's just too big to put into the constitution as such, but unwieldy, isn't it? So I guess where we refer to the code in the constitution, there's references in the constitution on code of conduct, and this other thing particularly, I imagine we'd want to refer to this document, and probably with words, and as I say, I think all members should be sent a copy of this, and all new members a copy, and in it you can say as well, you refer to this document and you say copies of which were sent to members. Or all members should have received a copy. If you haven't, please contact the monitoring officer, something like that. Yes.
So way, we recommend either adoption or approval to the council. It's not part of the code of conduct, but I assume it should go on our website, because otherwise it just get buried.
Yeah.
There's no point in approving
Yeah.
it. It's just, not publicised on our website, so we need to put it up somewhere in an appropriate place, but not, unless, I don't think we're saying that it should be part of our constitution as such.
Okay, we'll plonk it everywhere. Now, we've got chair of license in, chair of planning north. Are you, which one, either you going directly back to Councillor Vandercliffe or?
No, I'd like to go through you, Chairman. I'd like to suggest that perhaps we have a training session on this, and that especially with the social media procedure, because I do know that several councillors use social media and probably not always to the best. And I think it might be better as well is if people have to sign to say they've read this, so that there cannot be any doubt or discrepancy about not knowing what it is about.
Good, thank you. Okay, put that in. Right, chair of licensing, Councillor Sampson, and then.
Thank you, Chairman. Robert, you made a point about the examples. I found them very useful going through things. In the food chain, for want of a better expression, will these be handed down to parish councils and the like, the examples?
Yes, the guidance has already been distributed to all clerks of all parish councils. But moving forward with what we intend doing with it as well, what we're actually doing is producing our own dedicated web page with regard to code of conduct. We'll come on to the process procedure, and the idea is that this guidance will also be on that that web page as well. And again, the parish councils will be informed of that.
Chairman, a follow-up question for Mike.
Yeah.
When the next election comes, could there be this form part of the induction process in the councillors?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, it will be. Right, independent person, John Donaldson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to add to what was the previous discussion with was saying. In part 1 of the code, it says the code is a template for local authorities to adopt in a whole or with amendments to take into account local circumstances. I think that's quite important. And secondly, it says we are therefore pleased to publish the supporting guidance, which is aimed to help understanding and consistency of approach towards the code. And I think they're two very important points. And to take to the other point that a previous councillor suggested, in another authority, every councillor has to attend training in person and go through the code of conduct. And it's done on an annual basis, that they attend this training and they sign that they've received it. And I think that is the good step forward, because so often we've had training in the past and it's rather ad hoc as to who turns up. And if you say who turns up, it's always the busy people turn up, as it were, for the training. So I think it's essential, because time and time again, we find that there are flaws, and this is a good document. I think it's a supporting document, and it might even say, well, you might even consider at the end of the code itself, put a reference to this document that exists, and also the version date that we're talking about, which is dated the 8th of July 2021. Thank you.
Right, do any other members wish to comment on agenda item 5? No other members wish to, oh, yes, Councillor Vandercliffe.
Yes, I think that's a good point that was raised about maybe putting a reference at the end of the code to the guidance that this code be made in conjunction with the guidance on the government association code of conduct and the date of the guidance. The other point I just wanted to make is that I'm aware from attending parish council meetings that a lot of them have recently adopted our version of local government association code, which is pretty much the local government association code with a few minor amendments. Do we know whether we've now got 100% take up by the parish councils of this new LPA code. And isn't it a pity that they're now going to be asked to, having just done that, to amend it?
Thank you, Chairman. Rob might correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have full take up bar one council. Is that right, Rob?
We've got about 70% have actually formally already adopted. The others are in the process of doing so, and I think there is just one that we haven't had any details as to whether they're actually going to adopt or not. So we've got a pretty good rate, but you're right, we have to go back now and make these further amendments. The recommendation at one stage was to adopt, for the parish councils to adopt our code. That hasn't come in yet as law. That ultimately was one of the recommendations from a committee meeting. So in this in-between time, if we make any amendments, unfortunately, we have to pass them on to the parish council and they have to adopt.
So which parish council hasn't, and why?
I'm informed they have now, so that does look like 400% of
Councillor
either.
Baxter was getting his pen ready. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. Yes.
Just one practical point, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, with the training material, when it is prepared, it would be useful, obviously, to share that with parish councils as well. So they've got a ready-made package ready to go as well. And then a little encouragement to get them to arrange some training sessions.
Okay, so we now, Councillor Skip, Chairman of Council.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's just that presumably the Constitution will have to be amended in part. And will that be done automatically? Is that going to be referred to?
Yes, Councillor Skip, what we will be asking for when we take our recommendation up to full council, we will be asking for any consequential changes to be, for me to have the authority to make those changes. Thank you.
Right, we have a proposal in front of us that the Standards Committee recommend to full council the adoption of the Council Code of Conduct as amended. Are you all in agreement? The meeting is in agreement. Thank you very much. We now go into item 6, para 6, procedure for dealing with Code of Conduct complaints. And I do thank Councillor van der Kloeg and her committee and the officers and the members who contributed from outside in putting this together. I'll ask Sharon to give an introduction and then Diana. Sharon.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to echo exactly what you've just said, Chairman, in that this has been a huge piece of work. And it's something that I was really, really keen to do the moment I stepped into this building as the monitoring officer for this council. And I've said so many times, I've sat in the same position next to Councillor Donnelly and said, we're working on it, and this is what we aim to do. So it is absolutely fantastic that we do have something in front of you that we can look at and hopefully come to an agreement. A huge amount of work has gone in from Diana and her working group. I've found out that Councillor van der Kloeg works late into the evening, like I do, very late. And there has been a huge amount of work from the officers. So we had yourself, Councillor van der Kloeg, we had Councillor Lambert, we had David helping, sitting on the working group. John Donaldson was there with us, and Rob, again, a massive amount of work, and Peter alongside him who has helped. So I just want to thank everybody for everything that they've done. It's hard to explain, how hard it has been and how much work it has involved, because every little paragraph, means that we've had to look at possibly case law, look at what we're dealing with, look at past experience. And you have to reflect upon pretty much every single paragraph. So hopefully we've done a lot of that, the working group. We've also circulated this draft document, and we've heard and already had quite a lot of feedback. But obviously there are and there will be points that will be open for discussion here today, and hopefully we will come to some agreement, and we will be able to, send and recommend a very, very good procedure and piece of work up to full council. So my main thing is really to thank everybody that's been involved, and to hand over to Diana if she's and Councillor van der Kloot if she's happy for me to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Yes, I'd like to thanks for the working group, particularly the officers, Robert and Peter and all the support and enormous amount of hard work that's gone into this. And I think that the speed which it's been dealt with as well, because I think we've dealt with it all since the last standards committee meeting. It's just a few months ago. So it is a requirement by law that under the Localist Act there are arrangements in place for investigating complaints about breaches of the code of conduct and making decisions about those complaints. And we do have current arrangements in place. And when I came to try and look at them, I found it difficult to actually find them. But they do, I've got them here in front of me, they're actually 4 documents. This is our current arrangements, 4 separate documents. Guidance for members, the guidance for potential complainants, a procedure for local investigation, and the complaints form, all in separate documents. It's 58 pages. The language is often obscure, inconsistent, and unclear. And the process was not always up to date with best practice. So the working party's task was to produce a clear, streamlined procedure in accordance with best practice, written in clear, understandable language, and providing for the complaint to be dealt with in an efficient and timely manner. And the result is the document that you have in front of you as agenda item 6, which is now reduced from the current 58 pages to a 25-page one document containing the guidance, the complaints form, and flow charts. The main differences between the current procedure and the proposed procedure set out in the report. 3.4 emphasize in particular there's greater emphasis on the complainant presenting their complaint in a concise way, clearly stating the nature of the breach of the code, and also showing, explaining how the evidence that they are submitting relates to that breach. It will improve on the current situation where often the monitoring officer has to try and puzzle out what the complaint is about. And this will make it easier for the complaint to be processed. Also, the role of the independent person has been strengthened in lines with recommendations from the Committee on Standards in Public Life to ensure their views taken into account at various stages, in particular at assessment stage. And also, where a formal investigation takes place, this will be followed by a publication on the Council website, the decision notice, in line with best practice. Now, one change which is also highlighted is that the working party discussed whether the formal investigation should be conducted in public, and I think there were various views on this, and it was, I think, on balance, thought, well, there was saying that justice should be seen to be done, and that maybe it should be held in public. But I think this is something that we do have a concern about, and that's the way. And we would very much welcome the views of the Standards Committee, particularly those with more experience than people on the working group have of formal investigations, and whether they would think that would be a good route to go down. My own feeling is that if we do have reservations about that, then we should stick with the status quo for the time being of those formal investigations taking place as they do at the moment in camera, private. But I would welcome the views of the
Thank you very much to both of you for the introduction. It's not 50 pages. You said 50 pages.
I'm sorry, Chairman, the current.
It's gone down. But this one is you've halved it just. You had me nervous because I thought I've only read 24. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, I think what I'll do is, and I think it'll be quick and it's not as long as it sounds. I'll go through page by page, calling for any views. I mean, obviously, I presume page 71, 72, 73, 4 and 5, I presume no queries on those, and 76, if I'm correct. Then we have page 77, which of course is the front page, unless you think the line should be going the other way. I think that's the right way. Okay, we have page 78, that's the index. So put your hand up if you wish to comment. Page 79. Nothing on 79. Page 80. This is on from the agenda. It's quite page 80. I think you're following that all right. Page 80 is page 3 of the original. Okay, so page 81. We now go on to page 82. Page 83. This sounds like a bingo meeting. Sorry. Page 83. Anybody got 83? What's today, by the way? Wednesday. Oh, the lottery. Page 83. Nothing. Page 83. Page 84. Oh, sorry. Oh, you.
I just remind everyone on page 82 in our
Yep.
2.12. That's where it does say.
Sorry, at what number?
Paragraph 2.12.
2.12, yes.
It says in the second paragraph, if the matter proceeds to formal investigation and a standards committee
yeah.
or subcommittee
Okay.
is convened to determine it,
Yeah.
then the relevant committee or subcommittee will be conducted in public wherever possible.
Okay.
And I wondered whether people might want to discuss that.
Well, we've got that as well on, where is it? Right at the end, haven't we? That same para comes up. So I thought perhaps, yeah, is it, if we can, I think if we, yeah, it's, yeah, 8.9 on page 89 of the bundle. So if the meeting doesn't mind, let's leave that to the end, because that, I think, is perhaps one of the more intriguing ones. So thank you very much for reminding me of that, but we'll discuss that at the end. Okay, that's 82, 83. We then go to 84. Okay, 85. 86. 87. I should vary my voice a bit. So 87, 88. 89. And that brings us to that. Well, let me, I think that's the one we can probably have a good debate about. So if I may just park that until we finish the others, just to see how we're going to do time-wise. I'll come back to that. Page 90. 91. 92, 93. Look, what have I got there? 93, yeah, 94. Imagine nobody's got any comments on 95. Yes.
Quickly, if you've got multiple complaints about one person, how will you cross-reference this? Will they actually see sheet or something? How will that be done?
Well, they normally list.
Yeah,
They,
but
they
doesn't-
normally list all the areas.
Yeah, but I can see no way of cross-referencing them here.
What we would tend to do, if we do have multiple, as you know. What we have been able to do with our kind of trial bundling facility is we do put them all together. So there is an element of cross-referencing already that we would do, and we do take certain elements from each case. Do you mean when they're making the complaints?
Yeah, but what I can see happening is there's half a dozen complaints about a person. So we have to have 8 completely separate complaint forms for them.
Yes. Yes, yes, you would, yes. It's 7 different people
I
complaining.
know this, but currently we don't do that, do we?
Yeah, we do have individual forms for
I've
each
seen
complaint.
bundles and witnesses, all manner of things
Yeah.
before.
Could I-
Yes.
When we get a complaint, there's one complainant,
Yes.
2 or 3 councillors, say, for example, and when the rebuttals come in, each rebuttal will be itemised by the legal team as to what relating to that one person's complaint. So that it's because we do get multiple councillors relating to one complaint. There's not a joint complaint by 2 or 3 councillors. Every councillor stands on its own. But when 2 or 3 councillors are named in it, then the rebuttals will show that.
I've seen one in the past where there's been 2 or 3 councillors implicated, and each have got witnesses saying he did it, the other one said he didn't. It all gets very complicated when you look at it individually, but when you push them together, as we have done, it clarifies things. How are we going to do that with this?
Can I just, the idea is now is to have individual complaints against individual councillors wherever possible. There will be certain circumstances where if the facts arise out of exactly the same facts, the complaints arise out of exactly the same facts or very similar facts, then they may be dealt with together. But the idea now is to get individual complaints against individual councillors, and they won't necessarily be grouped together. I think that sort of makes it clear. At 3, separate forms should be completed in relation to each subject member unless the complaints can appropriately be dealt with together. For example, if the complaints arise out of the same facts. So what we wouldn't necessarily want is lots of different complaints if it's all about the same thing, just against different councillors. But if otherwise we want different complaint forms completed in relation to each councillor.
Hopefully, each complaint don't cross-reference or complaint to another complaint about the same person.
Indeed.
Yes.
Also, Chairman, when I get the file as an independent person, part of my sort of process is to try and separate it as much as possible. So I can look at the full circumstances, I can look at and say whether there's, you know, a code breach, but then I have to look at each individual person complained of and try and detach them into separate strands, if you like, which takes a bit of time to do, but in the end, it tries to make it a little bit clearer. So,
I want to be clear what Rob's just said, that if a member of the public makes a complaint, they only have to do one complaint form. We can't have, we shouldn't be in a situation where a member of public, there was 2 councillors involved, they had to make 2 complaints. You're not saying that, Rob, surely?
Not if the matter arises out of the same circumstances. Obviously, if they're completely separate complaints, then they ought to be dealt with completely separate, which will mean a different complaint form.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we were, what, 94, 95, 96, 97. The diagrams that follow thereafter, 3 sets of diagrams, 3 separate pages, taking us up to page 101. Page 102. And that's it. Right, so if we can now go back to the one that, yeah, sorry, Councillor.
Sorry, Chair, I asked a question, but it was a private question, and I'd just like to raise it with you on sanctions.
What page is this?
It's on page 90.
90.
And I can't remember what subject talking about it. It is C, subject member be removed from any or all committees or subcommittees, and D. But I can't remember whether we felt that because of that, the person who had been excluded would receive any allowances or financial recompense if they were not actually sitting on those committees.
I don't believe we have the power to do that.
I mean, that's what I'd like to.
Yeah, we don't have the power. You get me on my favourite subject, which is that we don't have the teeth we had before Lord Pickles got stuck into the Standards Committee of England in 2010, 11 or something. And we've been waiting for government to bring the teeth back in where we could be, we could make more meaningful, take more meaningful actions against proven malcontents by suspending without pay. Now, in the case of the parish councillors, these guys, work damn hard and there's no pay as such. But it would apply in the case of district councillors, et cetera, et cetera. But we wanted that, all councils wish to see that come back in its strongest form as it was before, whereby the instruction from the Standards Committee of the District Council had to be adhered to. In other words, people will be suspended without pay or allowances if it's applicable. They will be suspended, etc., etc. So we're living in hope, but fairness to government, that thing Brexit put them behind. Then the dreaded pandemic occurred, as you know, and now well, I'm a perpetual optimist, and I don't think we'll have a lockdown 3, but I'm a strategist, so I've been clocking it up for some time. So hopefully one would think in the new year, they might ultimately get the legislation through Parliament, whereby they will give back to the standards committees the teeth that they do require to make, is punishment the right word, or anyway, the decision more meaningful. But no, we have no power to withhold any remuneration or allowances. Okay, we all finish in having a quick run through there to see if there's anything still outstanding that people wanted. So that takes us then back to page 89, para 8.9, and it was also on page 82, para 2.12. And this is the one, I'll read it. This subcommittee, whether decided on the papers or at a hearing where personal testimony is required, shall be conducted wherever possible in public. Now, as everybody knows, for the past 100 years or whatever it was, we've always done these in exempt mode and in private. And what is said there, and one can understand why the Council of Undercross Committee put it in, it is considered best practice. And of course, it makes a lot of sense. We have nothing to hide, etc., etc. We do it in public. The only trouble is that the people who come up with best practice obviously don't, I don't want to say don't live in the real world, but those of us who've been dealing with these things for decades now, it seems, do know it's massively complex. And of course, under data protection as well, there's all sorts of factors. I wouldn't even start to go into that the lawyers have a field day. So cut a long story short, several people have spoken to me and said that, they do have a lot of concerns that the present system works well, that to have a meeting in public is probably going to open up a Pandora's box, and who knows where it will end. I don't have to go into detail about that, but some parties are very interested in our deliberations and probably would make a mountain out of a meal out of a mountain, whatever. I think that for justice to be seen to be done, and it's already been mentioned, and we already started doing it, but I would stress again that we will publish the results of the subcommittees. It'll be name, rank, regimental number, and every, it won't go into detail, but I think we'll put as much detail as we can put in. But name, I think the complainant's name must go in as well, the parish's name must go in, the complaint, and obviously there's fairly sanitized words that can be used that should not get anybody excited, and the decision of the standards committee. So there will be a record which will be meaningful and will be published, and I think that will help us introduce in a stronger deterrent against people who don't adhere to the code of conduct. So that's an important thing. So there'll be a regular list. In fact, I would say that we probably should expand our list going back 12 months just to get a bit of mileage on it, but I'll leave that up to the monitoring officer. Anyway, we want to look at having the subcommittee meetings in public or as we do at the moment. Anybody wish to comment on this? Yes, independent person Donaldson.
I might just add, Mr. Chairman, that there is a change whereby now we're taking up the recommended code that the independent person will be on that subcommittee and therefore monitoring it independently. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that. You're quite right. I was going to say something about that. I originally thought they were, putting too much of a load on the independent person by all the extension of his work involvement in the complaints. It is not an easy job. You have to, and you are, of course, both of you, totally impartial, neutral. But, getting involved with complainants and defendants is a very, very tricky business. It does test even the best lawyers in the world as to how you will be viewed in the future. And I know you're well aware of that. But Councillor van der Kloek had also mentioned in their intro the increased role for the independent persons, and there's two of you, of course. And I do welcome that for several reasons. We have, if I may say, two good people. Both have been involved one way or another in this type of work. John, I believe, does work for other councils, so has a phenomenally broad experience of dealing with these things at multitudes of levels, which we're very, very grateful for having in our committee. I believe it assists the monitoring officer and our legal department enormously. Not that they're alone, because we're all members are here to support and help if necessary, but I know on many occasions that the officers feel, what the heck now? And I think in having that formal relationship with the independents does strengthen the position enormously. Similarly, if the public have problems or complaints about the subcommittee's works, I think that can now be shown to be improper because of the presence of the independent person in the subcommittee meetings in exempt and private situation. And of course, I, as always, we're very happy that independent persons or the parish council reps do bring to our attention anything they feel is not appropriate and that perhaps we should look at, or that we've done anything improper. That's the beauty of this system, I think, and the beauty of having the independent persons and the parish representatives. So I believe we've got a huge range of experiences and resources in this grievance procedure and a complaint procedure, which I believe is a sort of level of standard that is very high and very professional. Of course, we wouldn't claim to be perfect, but almost. It's not a perfect situation. Yes.
Can I just mention, Mr. Chairman, there is a sort of halfway house process that's used by the police for complaints against police officers, and that is actually held in public. But if you wish to attend it, you actually have to apply in writing to the Police and Crime Commissioner for that process. So that might be one thing worth considering. I mean, I doubt if we'd get that many people actually applying in writing to do that, but that is the procedure that they adopt. And obviously, as with this, the results are published on the website, etc.
I did actually think of that thing. I'm a founding member of the Sussex Police and Crime Panel, and I sat on it for a few years. And I mean, that was always being debated, you know, the pro and con of it and whatnot. Anyway, yes, chair of licensing.
Thank you, Chairman. In principle, I think it's a good idea. However, I do have misgivings, as in licensing. When we have a licensing committee hearing, you'll find that you get levels of legal assistance to the person who's having their case looked at, and it becomes, I think others who've been on them, it's quite unworkable sometimes and very difficult for members of that committee. So in principle, I think it's a good idea, but in practice, I think there may be issues.
Yeah. Yes, well, I also sat chair as licensing, and in fact, involved in the delight. Was it 10 years ago when we introduced the 24-hour drinking thing? I think we had about 1,000 licenses to review. So we had multitudes of those sort of hearings. And, you know, as you say, you've got two senior lawyers, you know, sitting on the other side, trying to take our council lawyers to pieces. It was quite interesting, but I'm quite pleased to report after it took two of them to court for costs for vexatious representation, or it was quite a bit of money back then. Remember, the officers were horrified at the amount I wanted back, but I did the costing and we got it back. Anyway, thanks very much. Right, anybody else have a comment on this?
Similar to Jim's, actually, I think that it puts you in a very difficult position if you're against people that are challenging decisions publicly, and I think that that would be the wrong way to go.
I personally think we should carry on as it is. If there's any moans or groans, we could then review it. But it's not statutory to hold them in public, and there's no law that dictates that. As I say, saying that something's best practice for people who don't really have to practice it and haven't felt and dealt with the rough and tumble of licensing or even standards meetings, it's another story. Yes, Jim.
Thank you. Could we ask Sharon, what possible issues could arise in this situation if we go ahead with this?
It is I use the language I've used in my emails recently. It is tricky. It's very, very tricky. So what we're trying to do is we are trying to fulfill the best practice recommendations, and that as a working party, that's what we've tried to do, hence the drafting. I'm thinking of some of the more recent cases that we've had, and we can have things such as complaints of name calling, offensive comments being made. And so what I mean, you can look at, there are certain ways of doing things, and there are, whether we want to have a case by case discretion, I don't know. But the problem you've got is that, one, if you're going to come out with a no breach determination, you've publicly aired, haven't you, all of that complaint and all of the detail. So there is the argument that you've done that for no reason. And the other thing you have to look at is if it is going public, and we make that clear when they make a complaint, whether that's like to, one, put people off, and stop them from making a true complaint, or whether it's, again, stops people from making vexatious complaints. So we can work both ways. But what you'd have to be really careful of, we would have to, as if we were to go into a public formal investigation with the subcommittee, we would have to be really, really careful of if there was detail of somebody's, let's just think, mental capacity or any disability, if that's part and parcel of how the situation has come about or how the complaint, we would have to be very careful. And so it would be getting the detail out, but keeping the sensitive information in. And it can be difficult. I mean, clearly councils are able to do it. Some do a halfway house where the report is presented and the detail that can be given is given. And similar, even though councillors have commented that it's difficult in licensing, they go exempt for deliberations. And then they come back into the public arena to give a justification as to how they've gone about making that decision. But the actual true deliberations are exempt. Again, depending on what the case is about. So some councils have that discretion and use that discretion on a case-by-case basis. The majority of councils are following best practice. But again, I've worked in other authorities that may have 2 complaints a year. We're not one of those councils, hence the team. So there is best practice, but there's also bespoke situations, hence the code of conduct. We can make changes that are, relevant to us. And there is nothing within the legislation that says that we have to. So it is about working out what's best for this council, and potentially the idea of a review if we decide to stay status quo as we are. Review and see how we get on. If the complaints do change, will we ever be one of those councils that just gets 1, 2 or 3 complaints a year? I don't know. But I do understand that there is difficulty and sensitivity, certainly with some of the complaints that we've had recently, very recently. The idea of taking that public could be difficult. But Chairman, I think.
Well, just before you go, I think you've got in the last 2 weeks, you got, was it 6 or 8 from the one party, 6 or 8 emails with documents and stuff. So, the volume we go through is just, I know it's just unbelievable. And looking at some of that stuff, I just thought, this would be a lawyer's dream. If we publish all that, I mean, the litigation could be colossal. Licensing is a fair example. As Chairman of License has been telling us, and licensing, as Sharon's saying, just to repeat, it meets in public in a council chamber with the public, listens to the pros and cons, the arguments by the QCs or whoever. And then it does go off to a private room. There's 3 on the subcommittee there as well of licensing. They go then to a private room with the officers, legal officer, head of the licensing officer. And they deliberate in private, make their decision, write it up, and then come out and deliver the decision to the meeting. But while licensing does generate obviously some really hot subjects, I mean, noisy neighbours. I mean, the pub's the noisy neighbour, but there's also stuff. But it's not. It's nowhere near the, if may I use the word, slanderous stuff that comes into our subcommittees and committees. So Sharon sort of touched on as well is that old expression, mud sticks. Somebody lodges a complaint against somebody, quite outlandish. We could throw it out, but it's in the public place now. And most of the public won't know that it was thrown out. All they know is that parish councillor, what he does, he blah, 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 and off it goes. I don't like using the example because it's probably the one everybody sees so much of is in these rape cases. This is such a complex area. And they say at the moment it's not been well handled by the legal professional, by the police, but it is so complex because he says, she says. And in some ways, of course, some of the complaints we get is not quite he says, he says. It's always he says, he says. I think I can't remember, but he says, she says. But there is going to be reputational risks where you put into the public domain the full bundle. And if we don't put the full bundle in, we'll be accused of withholding evidence. And in addition to which, it's just going to double the workload on the officers to filter out what seems to be controversial subjects. It is a minefield, a lot of the stuff we're dealing with, total minefield. It is complex. It is very plan is with the new codes is to turn these complaints around much quicker. I think we'd all love it if we could get a response out in 30 days, you know. And I think we've got to set a target. We've got to set a goal of moving through them quicker, which of course must help the officers. They can't be sitting wandering through all this paper. It doesn't happen. And also, people have been complaining about. I mean, you know, they probably want to have a response quickly as well. And the dreaded cost word. And as I said, on many occasions, we used to have a right of appeal. People put in a complaint. We formed a subcommittee. Subcommittee then rejected it. And they then had the right of appeal. And back the bloke, it was also a bloke, wasn't it? Okay, the person came back. You know, I had to find 3 more members to sit on another subcommittee. Now, when we were getting about 5 a week, we eventually were having to go out into the full body of the council and find members who had some standards committee or standards experience. Perhaps the monitoring officer then gave them a quick half-hour refresher, and then we put them in a subcommittee. And I estimated at one stage it was costing about 100,000 quid, and it just went on and on. So we do have to be aware of time and cost as well. Jim. Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I completely agree with what you're saying, and the practicalities of dealing with the cases. It can become very, very difficult when everything goes out in the public domain. Just thinking about the redactions, etc., what may be needed, just does frighten me, to be quite honest. However, there is public interest in transparency, and there is a case that says that exceeds councillors' rights of privacy. The LGA have got guidance out regarding this point, because this does come up across councils. What they say is there should be consideration whether any parts of the hearing that are likely to be held in private, or whether any parts of the investigation report or other documentation should be withheld from public prior to the hearing. But it does go on to say the presumption should be to hold a public hearing unless there is specific exemption or confidential information. So that's the sort of LGA sort of position on it. So I just thought I would mention that.
But the LGA don't have to sit in the subcommittees, and they don't have to be the poor legal officers who are poring over these bundles and thinking, if we leave these words in, so we'll redact it. And you know what's going to happen when we send something that's, you know, half that shows redacted. I mean, it's bad enough when in American Congress they redact these spy reports and President Trump's finances and all those things. Straight away they say, oh, the cover up. And we'll have that challenge without a doubt. Jim, you're going to say.
Chairman, is it worth putting in a box of the person who's making the complaint, how many other complaints you've registered in the last 12 months?
Well, we will be listing the complaints and the outcomes. And so if it's Mr. A or Mrs. B, you know, that name will come up all the time. It'll be a permanent record, so people will be able to see that.
But it might sort of trigger the person who's putting them in to realise that he's doing it time and time again. Once we know that, can we not prioritise people who say their first complaint rather than people who make multiple complaints?
Well, you can see how successful we've been in stopping a particular parish council and lodging.
That's why I raised the question.
There's Chairman of Council.
I was all for actually making a comment, because I felt like as Rob outlined, there was a transparency issue. But in fact, I've been sitting here and the thought that's occurred to me, which is the most important part of this, is that we have independent persons sitting on committee.
Yeah, which is a new thing.
And that's most important.
Yes.
Yeah. Because actually, once your independent person is there and recognised as independent on that committee, the allegations that something been going on or material hasn't been utilised or looked at or considered should go out of the window.
Yeah.
So in fact, we should have that protection from the independent person. Now, if that's the case, then my understanding of why I want to put it out to the public for consideration or for them to listen
For the enjoyment.
goes out the window.
Yeah.
So I would very much probably do as we have done in the past.
Yeah.
But I do acknowledge the importance of the independent person.
Yeah.
Even though they are not having a vote, I
Yeah.
understand, but they will actually consent.
That I find and found when I looked at that as a very strong point. I mean, we value the independent persons and the parish reps, their advice. But, you know, we don't always necessarily accept it because, of course, you know, we all have other points of view. But the fact is they have had an opportunity to look at the full bundle and comment. But what Chairman of Council just said is terribly important. It's not just that they give advice, but that the independents are now going to be in the subcommittees, and they will be able to say, you know, it was properly handled, etc., etc. Or if there was anything wrong, I'm sure they would bring it to the attention of the subcommittee straight away and to the monitoring officer. So no, I think that's the powerful fallback position we have if anybody does complain. Coupled with, we'll be publishing the details.
Thank you, Chairman. You've just hit the nail on the head, actually. As Robert has just said, there is the public interest and transparency, and that comes from the LGA guidance, and obviously that's what the best practice recommendation is following. We also have looked at the ICO and what the ICO thinks with regard to publishing and naming and shaming and this type of thing. And again, the public interest is that members of the public need to know about their elected members. It's, you know, the ballot box speaks for itself. So that is really, really important. But as the chairman has just taken my words, he's what I'm about to take about. Again, we publish a decision notice. And that's whether it's a breach or not. So that is going out there. There is some transparency. Members of the public are knowing what is, you know, what behaviour and conduct is going on in the area. So we do cover ourselves with regards to that degree. And secondly, and I think Diana, Councillor van der Kloot, mentioned again, and we've gone over it, the strengthening of the independent person through all of this, the new code of conduct and everything that we're trying to put together. And one of our recommended changes in the new process is that the independent person will be there at the meeting to ensure and to give that kind of extra confidence and reassurance that, you know, yes, it's a closed in private meeting, but the meeting will be handled correctly and decisions will be made rightly and justly. So it is really, really important. We are, you know, although if that's a decision that this committee takes, that we do stay in private, we do have those safeguardings in place to make sure that it is a fair and just procedure. Thank you, Chairman.
There are two independent persons, which thus makes it easier for the officers to put together subcommittees to ensure that there will be one at a subcommittee hearing. And in fact, there will be an independent person at every subcommittee for the reasons that have just been outlined. And and I think that I think that monitoring officers possibly hit the nail on the head that maybe other councils are much luckier than us. They don't have the torrent of complaints we have from there. I think who's John and then Diana.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I have two or three questions. First, to answer Councillor Sanson's point about multiple complaints, as it were. It was requested and what went in. There is a document standing aside this about the other complaints, wasn't there, Rob? About vexatious complaints. And there was going to be a link reference to this other document that stands in the HDC.
The council's got its own policy with regard to unreasonable behaviour with regard to complaints.
Yeah, so link it that way. Thank you. But my second point is that regarding the independent person, what Sharon outlined, what's been discussed here, and this the meeting being held in private of the subcommittee, I would like it remembered that we are there to support also the complainant, as it were, to make sure it's fair. And I feel that if it is in private, a lot more, we want to, can I say in a nice way, be open to receive complaints in the authority, as it were. But if complainants knew that this was going to go into the public domain, they may be very careful. And we do have to be also very careful when we've got some professional people involved, you know, and you've got children as well on this, that there is a need to withhold identity on that basis. So we have to be very careful doing with respect to safeguarding and that.
Did you want to speak to that?
Well, thank you, Chairman. I was just minded to make some suggested amendments in the light of the discussion and debate which the committee has just had in relation to paragraph 2.12. In the second paragraph, then the relevant committee or subcommittee will be conducted in public wherever possible and to be removed.
Well, we could put in there conducted in private and take out wherever possible, which is the situation at the moment. It just will be conducted in private. Simple, clear, don't embellish it at all. Just wait and see what comes out hereafter. And similarly, if we're looking at that type of amendment, if you go to page 89, para 8.9, shall be conducted, and then take everything out, it just shall be conducted in private. And all the rest can come out.
Thank you, Chairman. That's I would agree with that.
Is everybody happy that we amend that accordingly? So simply put, it's just going to say what happens at the moment, that subcommittees will be in private. And see what happens thereafter. There's no legal requirement to do it in public. If the law changes, the law changes. It would be interesting to know what some of the usual suspects think of that, but I think sensible people will see it probably similar. I hope will see it similarly to what we've seen it, which is that I think it's a minefield, as John said. Well, as I've been saying, under data protection. I mean, there's all sorts of trip ups there that's going to catch us out, isn't it, John?
I just think, whilst you're talking about the committee and this wording, I would like to think, I'd like that the lawyers look at the word private. I mean, what is private, as it were, because you've got officers and things like that there. There may be a better terminology for that.
Well, you have reminded me. Thank you,
I mean,
John.
general public are excluded.
No, I don't think.
Right.
I don't think.
Yeah.
No, I don't even have to say that. Then that gets on somebody's nose. No, thank you. You have reminded me of something, which of course is the exempt notice. So I think, if I may suggest it, we'll conduct it in private and in exempt mode. Is that the word you would use? Or?
Exclusion of the press and public.
Yeah. Which is what we do anyway. We read that exempt notice. Several of you don't realise, but there's the standard exempt notice which we read before the start of the meeting, which is the exclusion of the press and the public. Yeah. Anything else anybody wants to say on that change? Is the monitoring officer happy with what we're going to put in, or you want to fine tune it? Or?
No, Chairman, it would be the recommendation that's detailed on page 71 that we recommend to full council adoption of the revised procedure with our agreed changes today.
Yep.
With regard to the code of conduct complaints as drafted. Thank you.
Does the meeting support the recommendation? The meeting supports the recommendation. Thank you very much. Right, let's get on to agenda item 7, standards update. Who's going to do that? Is it the monitoring officer? Or?
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to be mean and pass back to Rob. What I will do, since coming back and getting back into the land of the living again, clearly catching up on standards is always a priority. We have been, and again, I've told this committee on many occasions that I've been really lucky to actually have a standards team now, and to have drafted in other members of the legal department to assist. I've now had 2 deputies, as you can see. This is business continuity and pandemic kind of planning, really, which is fantastic. But what we have been doing is putting together, and this is down to Lauren who's here, putting together some templates for kind of a more standardization of our reports and our investigation reports that go to the independent person, but also to the complainant, the subject members. So huge amount of work has been put into that. We've been brushing up, all of us on the standards team, with regard to the most relevant and relied upon case law. Because, as I think we have told this committee, we have challenges coming at us, hook, line and sinker. Generally speaking, when there is a finding of a breach, we are challenged. We're challenged on our decision making and our report writing. So we've been doing our homework and staying on top of it, as we always have to as lawyers. But a huge amount of work has been going on, and a lot of that is down to Lauren. So I want to thank her personally. She's done a lot of work. I think it's been a real eye-opener for her to see how difficult it can be and how challenging some of the work is and how much time it takes. I don't know if Lauren wants to comment to the committee, but it's time-consuming and it is difficult. We want to make the right decisions. We want to get this right, and stand by the decisions that we make. And I've always said that this committee is particularly good at the work that it does. But it is good to have, fellow members and fellow lawyers and colleagues that help with that. Lauren, did you want to say anything?
No, not really, just to echo what you said, and to say that the crux of the work that I've undertaken thus far is to really make sure that our reports are they're proof, so people can't really challenge them. So whenever we make a finding of a breach or not, we can justify that and draw on relevant case law. So the risk of a judicial review is remote. So that's the work I've been doing. But yes, incredibly complex and time consuming.
Rob, did you want to give a kind of numbers?
Yeah, I haven't actually got the exact numbers. Safe to say that this is by far our highest number in this financial year. We average generally about 20 odd complaints in a given financial year. We're approaching 30 this year. They keep coming. There hasn't been any respite. We've dealt with most of them. We've got 2 investigations that Lauren is dealing with, which cover a number of complaints. We haven't got too many that are actually outstanding, so we have got through most of the cases. But as I say, we keep on getting new ones to replace the ones that we're actually getting through. I will produce for the next meeting full detailed numbers with details of what's happened on the cases at the next meeting, and also it's previously been asked, but I'll produce some details as to the kind of cost that we're talking about. That this is costing the legal team in dealing with in total, and this will obviously be approximate values, but I will produce that for the next standard.
What's your
meeting.
rough ballpark figure at the moment? I have mine, you tell me.
It is thousands and thousands. If
Say
you
100.
it could possibly, if you think that the lawyers' hourly rate, for example.
Don't remind us all.
Yeah, but even on a break-even basis, it will actually amount to a lot of money.
I've got a spreadsheet. I know you go on as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Diana.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Robert, I was just going to ask you if you could just clarify, you mentioned like 30 complaints this year. Are those against, mainly against parish councils or district councils? And also, how many of them relate from just one sort of parish council?
The vast majority relate to parish councils. We have had maybe 2, maybe 3 this year against district councillors that have all been sort of dealt with very quickly. The majority are from one particular parish council. I think there'd be no surprise with regard to that. Haven't actually got the exact figures, but it normally is coming in about 70-75% stem from one particular parish council.
Anybody else have any questions for the officers? Yes, Mike.
Just a point I mentioned earlier, that when the guidance on the new procedure goes out to parish councils, it may well be worth reminding them, or the clerks and the chairman, that this procedure was designed for members of the public making complaints against parish councillors and district councillors, county councillors, etc. It wasn't specifically designed for, if you like, the infighting of parish councillors making complaints against parish councillors. So I think it would be worth re-emphasising that this should be a last resort for parish councils. So there is mediation, there are parish councils' internal processes, and it would be useful to sort of re-emphasise to the parishes that they should have gone through all those processes first before they get to the stage of putting in a complaint via this process. And I think that certainly isn't happening, in that this becomes the first method of complaint rather than the last. So I think, again, that for what it's worth, it would be worth just re-emphasising that point to all the parishes.
Yes.
Yeah, Chairman, thank you very much. On that last point, is there a process, or could there be a process right at the start of receipt of a complaint which asks the relevant parish council whether it has gone through its own processes, so that the complaint can be sent back to that parish council if the answer is no? Thank you.
One officer. That'd be a good one. Monkey on back scenario. Put the monkey on their backs.
That is a very, very good question. When I have been involved in training in the past, and we have had the parish councils in, and actually attendance-wise, it was surprising. We did get quite a few parish councillors here. We actually held it here. That is something that I do advise strongly, and I do remind them. Again, we deal with, it tends to be the same clerks from the more troubling sort of parishes, and And that is one thing that they are very good at, making sure that they've already exhausted all avenues internally first. But you're absolutely right. For those parish councils that do, come to us, rarely, few and far between, it's certainly worth whether we can flag that up somewhere. But yes, we would always say that, and absolutely recommend that, do go through your own processes and your procedures first before you come to us. I do always ask that question myself when I'm being asked. Yes, take that on board.
Any other comments from anybody? If you could just minute that we must ensure that we're publishing as much detail as we can of the complaints. As I say, perhaps even consider going back 12 months to just amplify, because what we're looking for is a deterrent. I mean, meetings in public or subcommittees may be a deterrent, may not be, who knows. But the published word, when you started building it out a bit more, we certainly getting some vibes that this was attracting attention. And I think secondly, we've got to find ways of speeding up the process. I know the amount of stuff comes in, as I say, I won't mention his name, there's 6 or 8 emails from the one guy with stacks of stuff. I mean, just to read them is going to take you half a day almost. And I'd also like the monitoring officer, as the monitoring officer always does do when in contact with other councils and other monitoring officers, and also all legal officers, to keep pushing that we need the government to get a move on putting the teeth, if I may, I hope you don't mind me using that expression, but putting the teeth back into the powers that the standard committee has to attempt to get a message across that certain parties have acted most improperly. I mean, that's a really big one, I just don't understand Lord Pickles why he did that. Anyway, might find it in his memoirs as he's written it. Right. The last item is urgent business. I have none. Have you any urgent business at all?
I have none, Chairman.
Right, we declare the meeting closed, and I thank you all very, very much for your time and attention. And Liz is now switching off the audio. Switch off, Liz. So hang on.